A father's fear of abandonment turns into the greatest honor of his life. Here's how. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, highlighting the weathered lines on Mr. Leonard's face. At 78, he was a man of routine and quiet resolve. Every day began with the same ritual: coffee brewed black, a careful scan of the newspaper, and a slow walk through the garden. Life wasn't as bustling as it once had been, but it was familiar, and that was enough for him. But this morning wasn't ordinary. His son Jerome had called late last night, insisting on picking him up for what he described as a drive. Jerome was a good man, successful, thoughtful, but Leonard often felt a gulf between them, not because of a lack of love, but because of their unspoken differences. Leonard, born and raised in a time of rigid traditions, sometimes struggled to connect with Jerome's progressive worldview. Yet, Jerome had always respected his father's ways, or so Leonard thought. As Leonard waited by the front door, his cane propped against the wall, he noticed the small things: the crack in the doorframe he'd been meaning to fix, the smell of the lemon polish from the floorboards. This house was his life's work, the place where he and his late wife had raised Jerome. He couldn't shake the unease settling in his chest. Something about this drive felt off. The sound of Jerome's car pulling into the driveway jolted him from his thoughts. He grabbed his coat and opened the door to see his son stepping out of the car. Tall, confident, and with a quiet warmth in his expression, Jerome was every bit the man Leonard had hoped he'd become. Yet Leonard couldn't help but feel a pang of apprehension. Why now? Why this trip? "Morning, Dad," Jerome said, offering a wide smile. "Ready to go?" Leonard nodded but didn't smile back. "Where are we headed, son?" Jerome avoided the question with a casual shrug. "You'll see. Just trust me on this one." Trust. The word lingered in Leonard's mind like an unanswered question. He grunted softly and climbed into the passenger seat, settling in with his cane resting across his lap. The car's interior smelled faintly of leather and pine air freshener. Jerome had the radio tuned to a station playing soft jazz, but Leonard wasn't in the mood to enjoy it. As they pulled out of the driveway, Leonard cast one last glance at his house. Something about the way Jerome had avoided the question gnawed at him. He'd heard stories, horror stories really, of elderly folks being relocated to nursing homes without warning. The thought sent a wave of unease through him. Was that what this was? Was Jerome planning to leave him somewhere he didn't want to be? The idea felt ludicrous, yet it lingered. Jerome had been dropping subtle hints for months, talking about how Leonard needed more help around the house, how he'd been forgetting things. And then there were the brochures Jerome had left on the kitchen counter a few weeks ago, showcasing a pristine retirement facility. At the time, Leonard had brushed it off, but now he wasn't so sure. The silence in the car felt heavy, broken only by the hum of the tires on the road. Leonard stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood fade into unfamiliar highways. The further they drove, the tighter the knot in his chest became. He glanced at Jerome, who seemed focused on the road, his expression unreadable. Leonard wanted to speak up, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. Part of him didn't want to know. The truth, whatever it was, might be harder to face than the unknown. But Jerome's evasive silence only made the tension grow thicker, leaving Leonard to stew in his worst fears. The miles stretched out before them, each turn of the wheels adding weight to Leonard's already burdened heart. The familiar landmarks of home had long disappeared, replaced by sprawling highways and green exit signs leading to places he didn't recognize. Leonard's grip on his cane tightened as he tried to read Jerome's face, but his son's expression remained calm, almost unnervingly so. "Jerome," Leonard said finally, his voice breaking the silence. "You're not taking me to one of those places, are you?" Jerome glanced over, a flash of surprise crossing his face. "What places?" "You know what I mean," Leonard said, his voice sharper now. "A nursing home." Jerome let out a short laugh, but Leonard didn't find it funny. "Dad, no," Jerome replied, shaking his head. "Why would you think that?" "Because you've been dropping hints," Leonard shot back. "Talking about how I need more help, leaving those pamphlets lying around. I'm not blind, son." Jerome sighed deeply, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "I wasn't trying to send you a message, Dad. I was just keeping options open, in case you ever wanted something different." "Different? What's wrong with my house? It's been my home for 50 years. Leonard's tone carried a sharp edge, his frustration bubbling to the surface. Jerome didn't respond immediately, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "I just want what's best for you," he said finally, his voice softer now. "That's all I've ever wanted." Leonard looked away, his jaw clenching as he stared out the window. He didn't want to argue, but Jerome's vague responses only fueled his doubts. The unease from earlier had morphed into full-blown suspicion. Where were they going? And why was Jerome being so secretive? The scenery outside began to shift again, the highways giving way to smaller roads lined with tall oak trees. The sunlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled patterns across the windshield. Leonard felt his heartbeat quicken. This wasn't a route he recognized, and that only made things worse. "Are you sure you're not hiding something?" Leonard asked, his voice tinged with mistrust. Jerome sighed again, this time more audibly. "Dad, can't you just trust me for once? Not everything is some kind of conspiracy." Leonard didn't answer. He hated the way Jerome said it, as if Leonard's concerns were baseless, as if he were just some paranoid old man. But the truth was, Leonard had spent his entire life preparing for things to go wrong. It was how he survived, how he protected his family. And now, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was being kept from him. They drove in silence for a while, the tension between them palpable. Leonard could feel it in the air, thick and heavy, like a storm about to break. He wanted to trust Jerome. Really, he did. But every instinct in his body told him to be wary. The car slowed as Jerome took an exit leading to a small, rural road. Leonard's heart sank. This wasn't a place people went to visit family or run errands. It was quiet. Too quiet. He could see a few houses dotting the landscape, but they were far apart, each one isolated from the next. It felt like the kind of place where people were left behind. "Where are we?" Leonard demanded, his voice rising. Jerome didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled the car over to the side of the road and put it in park. He turned to face his father, his expression serious now. "Dad," Jerome said, his voice firm but calm. "I need you to trust me on this. Can you do that?" Leonard stared at him, searching his son's face for any sign of deception. He wanted to say yes, to give Jerome the benefit of the doubt, but his pride and his fear wouldn't let him. Instead, he folded his arms across his chest and said, "I'll trust you when you tell me what's going on." Jerome let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "You'll see soon enough. Just give me a little more time." Leonard's stomach churned. He didn't like surprises, especially not ones that came with this much secrecy. But there was something in Jerome's voice, a quiet determination, that stopped him from pressing further, even though his doubts still lingered. The car turned onto an even smaller road, flanked by fields stretching endlessly on either side. Leonard shifted uneasily in his seat, his mind racing through every possibility. If Jerome wasn't taking him to a nursing home, then what was this? Why all the secrecy? The longer they drove, the more Leonard's frustration grew, mingling with a gnawing sense of helplessness. Finally, the car slowed as they approached a cluster of modest buildings. Leonard's eyes narrowed, taking in the unfamiliar sight. The place didn't look like a nursing home, at least not the kind he'd seen in the brochures Jerome had left behind. There were no manicured lawns or uniformed staff waiting at the entrance. Instead, It looked like some sort of community hub. Children played in a nearby yard, their laughter carried by the breeze, and adults bustled about, carrying boxes and chatting in small groups. "What is this place?" Leonard asked, his tone a mix of suspicion and confusion. Jerome pulled into a gravel parking lot and turned off the engine. For a moment he didn't answer. He simply sat there, his hands resting on the steering wheel, staring out at the scene before them. "Come on, Dad," Jerome said finally, opening his door. "I want to show you something." Leonard hesitated, his grip tightening on his cane. He didn't like being left in the dark, and Jerome's cryptic behavior wasn't helping, but his curiosity won out. With a soft grunt, he pushed open the car door and stepped out, leaning on his cane for support. The gravel crunched under his feet as he straightened up, taking in the surroundings more closely. The building in front of them was simple but welcoming, with a large sign that read Community Renewal Center. Leonard noticed a mural painted on one side, depicting a vibrant scene of people from all walks of life coming together. The artwork was impressive, but it did little to ease his unease. Jerome walked ahead, motioning for Leonard to follow. "Trust me, Dad," he said over his shoulder. "This is something you need to see." Leonard muttered under his breath, gripping his cane tightly as he shuffled after his son. They entered the building through a set of double doors, and Leonard immediately noticed the hum of activity inside. The air was filled with the sounds of conversation, the scrape of chairs against the floor, and the faint aroma of coffee brewing somewhere nearby. The interior was bright and open, with large windows letting in streams of sunlight. Tables were set up in neat rows, some occupied by people engaged in lively discussions, others piled high with supplies. On one wall, a bulletin board displayed a variety of flyers: community events, volunteer opportunities, free classes. It was a far cry from the sterile, institutional feel Leonard had feared. "What is this place?" Leonard asked again, his voice softer this time. Jerome stopped and turned to face his father, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "This," he said, gesturing around them, "is something I've been working on for the past year." Leonard blinked, taken aback. You've been working on this?" Jerome nodded. "Yeah, it's a community center, Dad. A place where people can come together, learn, grow, support each other. I wanted to create something meaningful, something that could make a real difference." Leonard stared at his son, the weight of Jerome's words sinking in. He looked around again, seeing the place through a new lens. There was an energy here, a sense of purpose and connection that he hadn't felt in a long time, but he still didn't understand why Jerome had brought him here. "What does this have to do with me?" Leonard asked, his brow furrowing. Jerome's smile widened, but there was a hint of nervousness in his eyes. "You'll see. Come on, there's one more thing I want to show you." Reluctantly, Leonard followed his son down a hallway lined with more murals, each one depicting scenes of community and resilience. They stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall. Jerome reached for the handle, hesitating for a moment before pushing it open. The room inside was spacious and filled with light. At the center stood a large table surrounded by chairs, and on the table was a small plaque. Leonard stepped closer, his heart pounding as he read the inscription, "The Leonard Renewal Room, in honor of a man who taught us the power of community." For a moment, Leonard couldn't speak. He felt the weight of emotion pressing against his chest, his throat tightening as he tried to process what he was seeing. "This center exists because of you, Dad," Jerome said quietly. "Your stories, your values, your belief in helping others. It inspired me. I wanted to create a place that reflects everything you've taught me." Leonard turned to look at his son, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. But in that moment, The decades of unspoken gratitude and quiet misunderstandings between them began to melt away, replaced by something deeper, a bond renewed. Leonard stood frozen in place, his eyes fixated on the plaque. The words etched into it felt surreal, as though they belonged to someone else. For decades, he had believed his contributions to the world were small, raising his son, fixing what was broken, and living simply. But now, he was confronted with the profound realization that his life had shaped something far greater than he could have ever imagined. Jerome stepped closer, his voice soft. "Do you remember, Dad, when I was a kid, how you used to take me to the soup kitchen every Saturday morning?" Leonard blinked, his thoughts flashing back to those cold mornings when they'd bundle up and head to the church basement. He remembered Jerome, barely tall enough to see over the counter, helping serve meals to those in need. It had been their routine for years, a quiet way to give back. "I didn't think you noticed much back then," Leonard said, his voice trembling slightly. Jerome chuckled. "I noticed everything, Dad. I noticed how you treated everyone with respect, no matter their situation. How you'd sit and listen to their stories, even when we were running late. You didn't just teach me to give, you taught me to care." Leonard's grip on his cane loosened as he processed his son's words. He had always seen those Saturdays as a way to instill responsibility in Jerome, a lesson in humility. He never realized the depth of the impression it had left. Jerome gestured around the room. "This center is built on those same values. I wanted it to be a place where people feel seen and heard, where they can come together and rebuild their lives. And I couldn't think of a better name for this room than yours." The weight of Jerome's gesture hit Leonard all at once. His knees felt weak, and he slowly lowered himself into one of the chairs at the table. He ran his fingers over the plaque, the cool metal grounding him in the moment. "I don't know what to say," Leonard admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything," Jerome said, sitting down beside him. "Just know that everything you've done, everything you've taught me, has led to this." The room fell silent for a moment, save for the faint sounds of activity from the hall outside. Leonard's mind raced, replaying moments from his past. The sacrifices he and his late wife had made to provide for Jerome. The nights spent repairing broken appliances instead of resting. The quiet pride he'd felt watching his son graduate, even as he worried about the growing distance between them. Leonard cleared his throat, his voice steadier now. "I didn't always get it right, you know. I was hard on you sometimes, maybe too hard." Jerome smiled, his eyes warm. "You were doing your best, Dad. And that's more than enough. I wouldn't be who I am without you." The words struck a chord deep within Leonard. For years he had carried a quiet guilt, wondering if he had pushed Jerome too hard, if he had failed to show his love in ways that mattered. Hearing his son's reassurance felt like a weight lifting off his chest. Leonard glanced around the room again, his gaze lingering on the walls adorned with photos and artwork. He noticed a large bulletin board filled with pictures of smiling faces, children, families, elderly men and women. Below the photos were handwritten notes of gratitude. "Thank you for helping me find my strength. This place saved me. You gave me hope." "These people," Leonard began, gesturing toward the board. "They come here for help." Jerome nodded. "Some come for classes, others for counseling or resources. We've got programs for kids, job training for adults, support groups for seniors. It's a place where people can start over, no matter what they've been through." Leonard felt a lump form in his throat. He thought of all the times he had worried about being a burden, about fading into irrelevance as he grew older. Yet here he was, in a room that bore his name, surrounded by the tangible impact of his life's values. "You've done something incredible here, Jerome," Leonard said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you. So proud." Jerome's smile widened, and for the first time that day, Leonard saw a flicker of vulnerability in his son's eyes. "That means a lot, Dad. Really." They sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of the moment settle between them. But Leonard's mind was already racing ahead, envisioning the possibilities. He thought of the long days that stretched out before him, days he often spent alone in the quiet of his home. Here, in this center, he saw a chance to fill that quiet with purpose. "What about me?" Leonard asked suddenly, straightening in his chair. "Is there a place for an old man like me around here?" Jerome laughed, a genuine hearty sound that seemed to echo in the room. "Are you kidding? We could use someone like you, Dad. Your wisdom, your experience, it's exactly what this place needs." Leonard's heart swelled. He hadn't realized how much he longed to feel needed, to contribute in a meaningful way again. The idea of spending his days here, surrounded by people and purpose, filled him with a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. "All right," Leonard said with a firm nod. "You've got yourself a volunteer." Jerome grinned. "Deal." For the first time in a long time, Leonard felt a sense of peace settle over him. But more than that, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a realization that his story wasn't over yet, and that the chapters ahead might be the most meaningful of all. The drive back home was different. The tension that had clouded the morning was gone, replaced by an easy silence. Leonard leaned back in his seat, a faint smile tugging at his lips as the countryside rolled past the window. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, as if a burden he didn't even realize he was carrying had been lifted. As they approached Leonard's house, Jerome glanced over. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, his tone softer than it had been earlier. Leonard chuckled, a low, quiet sound that spoke volumes. "Better than okay," he replied. "You've given me something I didn't think I'd ever feel again." "What's that?" Jerome asked, parking the car in the driveway. "Hope," Leonard said simply. They sat in the car for a moment, neither rushing to get out. Leonard stared at his house. The familiar walls and windows that had once felt like a cage now felt like a part of his story that he could revisit with a new perspective. He realized that life wasn't about holding on to what was, but about embracing what could be. Before heading inside, Leonard turned to his son. "Thank you, Jerome," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "For everything." Jerome smiled, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me everything I needed to do this." The words hung between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the love and lessons that had shaped their journey. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that made it enough. Weeks later, Leonard found himself back at the community center, a volunteer badge clipped proudly to his chest. He greeted visitors, shared stories, and helped organize programs. He had become a fixture of the place, a source of wisdom and humor that drew people in. In the process, Leonard rediscovered himself, not as an aging man waiting out his days, but as someone with the power to inspire and connect. The once empty hours of his days were now filled with meaning, and the bond with his son grew stronger with each passing moment. Sometimes, life takes unexpected turns, and it's easy to misjudge the intentions of those we love. But often, those turns lead us to places we never imagined, places where we rediscover purpose, family, and the simple beauty of giving back. If you've ever found yourself on an unexpected journey, embrace it. You might just find the best chapters are still ahead. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales. Let's keep sharing the power of connection and community. Thank you for watching.